For a lot of writers, the worst note we can get is this. I thought it was just too predictable. And that stings because it not only implies that our story and our characters are flat, it kind of indirectly implies that we as creators were not creative and clever enough, that we are kind of flat. And that just stings, it hurts. So today we're going to talk about where predictability comes from, and I'm going to give you 6 tips to help you kind of not be so predictable, which is kind of ironic, right? Because I just told you I'm giving you 6 steps, so now that's predictable. Or is it? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking if you find value. I really do appreciate it. Please be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that. There's links below. Be sure to check those out. Let's jump in. Let's be clear right off the bat. Predictability does not come from using story structure or story maps or story circles or whatever you're using to kind of figure out your story. That is not where predictability comes from. So if people are telling you don't use that because it makes your story predictable, okay, they don't know what they're talking about. That's not true. Can it be a result of that? Well, yes. If you're not doing some of the other things that we're going to talk about in this video, yes, you can end up with a predictable story. But just using those story structure maps, that does not cause your story to be predictable just in and of itself. It's not a one-to-one correlation. So what is predictability? Well, predictability is concerned with the how something happens, not the what of something happening. Okay, so if I know that something is going to happen, all right, that doesn't make it predictable. It makes it inevitable, right? There's inevitable moments in stories. As soon as you start creating a story, there's going to be some inevitable moments. Typically, your protagonist and your antagonist are going to face off at some point. So let's just reflect for a second. I'm guessing most of you have seen Avengers Endgame. And if Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man hadn't faced off against Thanos, we would all feel incredibly disappointed. That is an inevitable scene. Now, the how that scene plays out is not predictable. The fact that it's going to play out, yeah, that's inevitable. So what happens does not make something predictable. So if you're like, oh, well, I know that's going to happen and that's going to happen, that's going to happen. Okay, cool. But can you tell me how? Okay, it's not predictable then. Just makes it inevitable. So there is a difference between predictability and inevitability. Inevitability is good. Predictability, not so good. So if a scene plays out exactly how we imagine it, okay, that's predictable. That's what we want to avoid. All right, so how does predictability happen? Well, one tool that we like to use a lot in screenwriting, any storytelling really, is this tool of plant and payoff, where you set something up and then you pay it off later. Now, a lot of times this happens in that we want the resolution to be this certain way, and so we plant something early on so that the resolution makes sense. When it becomes predictable is when that plant and payoff are too close to each other in the story. For plant and payoff to work, you want to give as much time as you can between the plant and the payoff. The further apart they are, the better they are, the more satisfying it feels. But the closer they are, the more predictable things start to feel in your story. So if you've got an element in your story that just feels predictable, it's probably why, is because the plant was too close to the payoff, and it kind of helps telegraph things and the audience picks up on it. It's like, oh, that was convenient. Oh, there we go. I know how that's going to play out now. And then it plays out that way and we're like, that was predictable. Okay, that's not what you want. You want to plant early on, so separate those two. So that's one way that it happens. Another way predictability happens is when characters' actions are telegraphed for the audience. So the character essentially says, hey, I'm going to do ABC, and then they go and do ABC. Okay, that's bad because now it's predictable. Now I'm not surprised. It just kind of went how the character expected it to go, and that's not a good thing. To kind of thwart this one, you actually never want things to play out exactly as your characters imagine them, or you don't let the audience in on the whole thing. So just think about your favorite heist movie. So if you've got a heist movie you've watched where somebody's trying to steal something, we see them planning it. If we see them plan it all in detail, then when they get to executing it, it doesn't go exactly as planned. If we don't see all the details, okay, they've planned it, but there's things that they leave out. Then when we watch it, when things happen, The characters aren't surprised by how it turns out because it's like, oh, they planned it that way. But we, the audience, are surprised by how it turns out because we weren't aware of the initial planning to begin with. So a great example of this would be Ocean's 11. Okay, just Ocean's 11. There's things that we see kind of what's expected and we see how they're trying to do things, but there's other things that we aren't fully aware of that play out that are surprising to us. And that's why it works, because things are not being telegraphed for the audience. The last reason predictability happens is because we as the storytellers are just too easy on our protagonist. I mean, our job really is to torture our protagonist. You want to make it as difficult as you can for your protagonist. And when you make it too easy, when you give them easy outs, predictable. Most of the time, all of these happen because we either haven't taken the time to adequately plan out our characters or adequately plan out our story. And we're just kind of figuring them out as we're writing, and things become lazy or convenient and we put them in there. And then when people read it, they're like, yeah, it's predictable. We're like, what do you mean it's predictable? No, predictable. So if you're only figuring out enough about the character just to make the story work, not quite enough. Now, there are some ways to find details and add layers and stuff in, but you have to be cognizant of it when you're doing the writing and when you're doing the planning. But if you're just kind of doing the minimal work, things are going to end up being predictable. Screenwriting is hard work. Telling stories is hard work. And don't think it's easy. It's hard work. It's sweat equity. Okay, sometimes like sweating blood equity. So just realize it's going to be hard going in and don't take the easy way out. When you take the easy way out, predictable. The first solution you think of, predictable. The second, third, and fourth solution you think of, predictable. Okay, fifth one starts to get, hey, that one's interesting. When you're writing a story, you kind of want to start disregarding the initial things of how a character might solve a problem. Well, they do this, this, and this. Okay, none of those. None of those are on the table. What's another way they would do it? Oh, maybe they do it this way. Okay, now that's less predictable. Remember, predictability is about the how something happens, not the what. Okay, so they're going to steal the gold. They're going to break into the vault. They're going to, rescue the prisoner, whatever it is. We know that's going to happen. We just don't know how. And it's the how that you have to navigate in predictability. All right, 6 ways to counteract predictability. Number 1, give your character options. Every time they have a choice, okay, give them an option. They can go forward this way. They can go around. They can run away. They can hide. They can wait. I mean, give them options for things to do. If you're giving them options for things to do, we, the audience, now are like, well, are they going to do this or this? Now that automatically raises our how antenna, and now we're participating. It doesn't feel predictable. So this one's pretty simple, right? Just make sure your character has choices. Don't force them into one trajectory where they can only do this one thing. And maybe you've got a story where they kind of have to do this one thing. That's fine, but then you want a character that's going to be rebelling all along the way. They're constantly trying to do this other thing or find another way around it, or there's got to be a shortcut. There's got to be this, and we see how they're trying to solve this problem doing their own thing. And that helps create some unpredictability because we're not sure what the character is going to do. Are they going to go with this or are they going to deviate? And if they go with this, they're probably not going to totally follow along. They're not going to toe the line. They're going to do this other thing. That helps to create unpredictability, which is a good thing. Number 2, don't underestimate surprise. Surprise is a powerful tool. Now, you can't overuse it. Okay, you can't overuse it, but you can definitely use it. Let's say you've got this character and maybe they're a rebel, right? They're constantly rebelling against things, but they finally are like, okay, I'm going to do the one thing. I'm going to do the thing you're wanting me to do. And we're like, okay, finally, predictable. Now surprise. Now somebody else enters the scene. Somebody else comes in. A villain shows up unexpectedly. Like whatever it is can be a surprise. Surprise always counteracts predictability, pretty much always, unless you are predicting the surprise, right? You watching a horror movie and somebody's walking through the house and you know something's about to jump out. Sure enough, there's a cat that jumps out and then the killer shows up. But you can kind of reverse those, and this is where predictability starts to kind of play into the trope thing. I'm going to circle back to tropes in a second. Another way you can use surprise in your story is to kill off a supporting or string character, somebody that the main character or even the antagonist really care about. That forces them into a new decision because they were going to do this thing, but now this person died, so now I'm going to do this other thing. So a surprise can cause all kinds of issues and help with unpredictability. Again, unpredictability is usually a good thing. A third way to avoid predictability: make sure your antagonist is stronger than your protagonist. For those of you who might be sports fans, you might have heard people comment on things like, this team is stronger than this one on paper. Okay, so when I look at them on paper, this team is stronger than this one. They should beat this one every time. But those two teams get on the field or on the court or whatever, and this team wins sometimes. Why are they winning? This team should be better. Well, that's kind of like how your relationship should be with your antagonist stronger and your protagonist. Okay, on paper, the antagonist always should look stronger. My guess is because our default is to be too easy on our protagonist, your antagonist is not that strong. So make them stronger. That forces your protagonist to have to do other things in unpredictable ways. Number 4, if you're writing a genre story, horror, action, whatever, try to avoid or spin the tropes. So I mentioned the trope earlier from a horror movie, right? Somebody's walking through a house and something jumps out. Okay, that's a trope. They're the jump scare. Now, that's a surprise, so that usually helps with unpredictability, but if we are a fan of horror films and we see somebody walking through a house, we know something's going to jump out and scare them. What if it doesn't? And what if it's just sitting there watching the whole time, not jumping, not scaring? We just see it in the corner, but the character doesn't see it. Or maybe the character does and nothing happens. This causes some unpredictable moments because the trope says this thing should happen. But if you spin the trope or avoid the trope altogether, now that creates an unpredictable moment for you, the storyteller. Now the audience gets to more fully enjoy that moment because it's not predictable. The other thing you can do with tropes is make sure that your character has a flaw. Okay, so they're gonna do something wrong. They're gonna make the wrong decision. And we know they're gonna make the wrong decision. Even though in some ways that feels predictable that they're going to make the wrong decision, we hate that they're making the wrong decision and it doesn't feel predictable because we were hoping they were going to make the right decision. But in this moment, they make the wrong decision because they have a fundamental flaw about them. So using character flaws can help you navigate this whole trope thing if you're writing a genre type story. Number 5, make sure you include major twists and reversals in your story. Now, you don't want a big twist every 2 pages, right? But every 10, 15 pages, not a bad idea to have a good twist, a good reversal. The character's going along this way. Their boss has said, hey, you need to go steal this thing because that's what needs to happen. And so the character's like, okay, so they go steal the thing only to realize their boss is the bad guy and they shouldn't be stealing it. They should actually be securing it more heavily, right? It's a reversal. There's new information. So the character was going this way, but they have to make a total change of direction because of information they got, information we, the audience, are also going to get. Creates a reversal. Now things are unpredictable because if they were going this way, we can be like, oh, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. All those things are going to happen. But they get to step 1 and they have to make a right turn. And we're like, oh, well, that's different. Okay, that's unpredictability. So give reversals, give twists, always a good thing. Before I get to the last one, if you're finding value, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell, all those things. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for watching. YouTube really loves all those interactions. Comment below about a way to avoid predictability if you know of some way that I am not mentioning, or a movie that is super predictable. So if somebody wants to see what's a predictable movie, drop that in. You could even include an unpredictable movie if you want. Like, hey, this was done really well. So just drop a comment below. Again, YouTube loves all those interactions. It helps other people find this channel. I really appreciate it. The last way I'm going to talk about for you to avoid predictability is to do this. Ask yourself this question. What is the one thing the character does not want to do to solve the problem? Like, what's the one thing they will avoid at all costs? Whatever that is, that's what they need to be doing. Now, you don't want to orchestrate it too much, right? It's got to make story sense that they get there. They've got to maybe build up to it. Maybe it's somebody that's scared of heights, and to get to this one site, they've got to like parachute out of a plane. You're just like, that's not going to happen. And they try every way they can to get to this place without parachuting in, but all of them fail. That's their last resort. Make them do the thing they do not want to do. This kind of comes with the plant and payoff. You plant that way early on, right? And then it's satisfying when they're willing to do the thing that they don't want to do to help solve the problem. So ask yourself the question, what is the one thing the character doesn't want to do? Make them do that. That helps with predictability. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If it has, like, subscribe, bell, all those things. Again, I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. When you go to tell a story, try not to be too predictable and tell a story that matters. See you later.